Welcome, lovers of the radio airwaves. It's time for another look-see on all the exciting happenings in the world of radio communications, the internet, and technology in general. Now celebrating our 23rd year of service to the amateur radio community all around the world, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1214 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The Federal Communications Commission issues a reminder to all amateurs. We will have the details on what you need to know. Scientists hoped that the dark side of the moon would be immune to Earth-based RFI. They were wrong. We will tell you all about what they found out. The Wireless Institute of Australia announces that those under 18 years of age in that country can now take the amateur radio exam online. China prepares the final mission to complete its Tiangong space station. The Awrl is seeking an administrative coordinator for a brand new grant program. Think you can help? We will have all the details. A Connecticut radio amateur endows a brand new Awrl affiliated club initiative. A new ground wave experiment is happening on 630 meters. We will tell you how you can participate. There is concern on amateur radio coexisting with satellite and navigation on 23 centimeters in IARU Region 1. We will have the details. And kids are amateurs too. We will have a report from across the Atlantic from G4HPE in the UK. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from Amsat and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Our technology reporter, Leo Laporte, W6TWT, takes a look at the latest generation of ARM processors and how they are replacing the old x86 processors. Australia's own Onno Benshoff, VK6FLAB, will answer the age-old question, what are the rules for calling CQ on a repeater? Our own amateur radio historian, Bill Continelli, W2XOI, returns with another edition of the Ancient Amateur Archives. This week, Bill begins a new summer series of amateur radio history headlines, featuring just the headlines of amateur radio history beginning in the late 1800s. And our tower climbing and antenna master, Greg Stoddard, KF9MP, covers everything you need to know to install and maintain your tower and antenna installation for your station. This week, Greg takes a look at the various methods of waterproofing antenna coax connections. That and a whole lot more is all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio here in beautiful downtown Albany, New York, I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting this week from my home studio in Cortlandville, New York, where the grass is as high as an elephant's eye, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from the newsroom in Half Moon, New York, I'm Terry Saunders, N1KIN.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where we're cutting our first cutting of beautiful long grass hay, and where the corn is up about 6 inches or so. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from a sunny and bright Troy, New York News Bureau, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And from Studio 1 of our Central Florida News Bureau, where hurricane season has started, I'm Fred, November Fox 2 Fox.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where the warmth of summer is just around the corner, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now with our lead story, here is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Leading off this week's news, the Federal Communications Commission has issued a reminder to all amateurs that the agency's Legacy Commission registration system, known by the acronym CORS, is being retired effective July 15th. Hams who are already using the current version of CORS, also known by the name CORS 2, are not impacted by the retiring system. Legacy Cores users must make the transition by establishing a username account and then accessing Cores 2 to associate their registration numbers with their usernames.
The chair of the IARU Region 1 Spectrum Affairs, Barry Lewis, Gulf 4 Sierra Juliet Hotel, has been reporting on the work being done in defending the interests of amateur services in the 1240 to 1300 MHz band, also known as 23 centimeters. Writing on the IARU Region 1 website, Barry said that during the period between May the 4th and the 10th, 2022, the IARU continued to engage in the preparatory work for World Radio Conference 2023, the agenda item on this subject. Work continued to develop the coexistence studies between the amateur services in the 23 centimeter band and the commercial radio navigation satellite services operating in the same band. New studies were submitted by France, China, and the Russian Federation. The scale of the problem for the amateur services is becoming clear. For example, the studies predicted that even a 10-watt 23 centimeter band station could cause interference to radio navigation receivers at distances of up to 30 kilometers on the antenna main beam heading. Although the level of amateur activity and the density of users is quite low compared to other more popular bands, the issue remains that from a regulatory perspective, the amateur services are required to not cause harmful interference to radio navigation satellite services. On the IARU Region 1 website, there's a sample of one result from one study, and this illustrates the scale of the problem. In the example, a station using an 18 dBi gain antenna is used for both narrowband and wideband, that's usually amateur television, transmissions, and a range of power levels. The protection criteria for radio navigation satellite receivers differs for narrowband and wideband interfering signals. There's a diagram that shows clearly how far out from the amateur station the navigation system's protection criteria could be exceeded along the antenna main beam heading, and the distances are measured in kilometers. The results in this study were developed based on the International Telecommunications Union-defined receiver protection level for the Galileo radio navigation satellite service. The measurements also showed that an improvement in the compatibility potential can be seen if the amateur signals avoid the center portion of the Galileo receiver passband. Of course, the studies cannot take into account every possibility that might mitigate the problem, but it is clear that the potential for interference is considerable. The IARU is working hard to ensure that the amateur service can continue to develop in the 23 centimeter band and allow all the amateur applications in use today to continue. However, given the heavy spectrum occupancy of the band by the various radio navigation satellite systems, it is evident that proposals will come, calling to restrict radio amateurs' ability to operate in certain parts of the band and at the power levels allowable today. The IARU is totally engaged in the discussion of these considerations, and these will continue. The IARU summary report on the Working Party meeting can be found at www.iaru.org, and you need to go to the Working Party 4C pages.
According to the Morning Post newspaper in China, there were high hopes for the radio telescope aboard China's Chang'e 4 lander when it touched down on the dark side of the moon 3 years ago. Chinese scientists believed that such a remote, unilluminated location would be free of radio noise because the moon is a shield against radio frequency interference from the Earth. They were wrong about the absence of noise altogether, however. The low-frequency radio spectrometer aboard the lander's relay satellite cannot do its work to unlock the mysteries of the universe until another mystery is solved: how to block the noise from the moon lander's own radio emissions. Knowing early on that these emissions would pose an issue, scientists took preventive measures, but they apparently have not succeeded. One of the causes is apparently the electromagnetic leakage from the lander's power source. According to an academic paper cited in the South China Morning Post, the lander's noises are 2 to 3 times greater than the signals that the radio telescope had hoped to observe and even block the strongest pulses emitted by the sun. Researchers are now studying a mathematical solution that they hope will boost the sensitivity of the radio telescope, which is designed to receive frequencies under 30 MHz. Also, according to Chinese mythology, their goddess of the moon bears the name Chang'e.
In a reversal of their earlier policy, the Australian Communications and Media Authority and the Australian Maritime College have announced that they'll permit amateur radio candidates under the age of 18 to sit in exam sessions remotely. Online sessions for these younger candidates had previously been prohibited, even for those older than 18 who were able to complete their own exams in this manner to comply. The changes are being allowed under certain conditions, including the requirement that a parent or a guardian be present in the room while the test is underway. Remote exams are conducted by the Australian Maritime College Level 3 assessors. As you could imagine, the previous policy had quite a negative impact on the ability to bring youth and teenagers into the amateur service, especially during the last 2 years of the COVID pandemic and lockdowns, as face-to-face exam sessions were extremely restricted or not allowed. Under the revised policy, some specific conditions must be met first, and the information received from the Office of Maritime Communications and AMC Amateur Radio is quoted as saying that remote assessments for candidates under the age of 18 are permitted to be conducted and have additional stipulations. A condition for conducting a remote online assessment for a candidate under the age of 18 is for a parent or guardian to be present in the room while the exam is underway. The following additional information is required to be sent to the office: an email address along with a contact phone number of the parent or guardian available to be present on the day of the assessment is planned to take place. This change will also be in conjunction to the proposed fully online examination service AMC has been proposing to be released for use later this year. The Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Maritime College thanks the examiners for their consideration in amending their exam policy, as this simple change is a big win for the AMC assessors, the WIA, and the amateur radio service in Australia.
China released details about the final stages of work on its Tiangong space station, an under-construction orbiter started after the U.S. barred Beijing from participating in the International Space Station. The Shenzhou 24, which will carry 3 astronauts in June for a 6-month mission to Tiangong, was moved to the launch pad at the Jinguan Satellite Launch Center in Inner Mongolia on Sunday, state media reported, with a launch scheduled in the coming days. Following that mission, China will launch one of the station's lab components in July, and the second in October, the official China Daily reported on Sunday. After the space labs, the Tianzhu 5 cargo craft and the Zhenzhou 15 crew are scheduled to arrive at the massive orbiting outpost around the end of the year, according to the China Daily Report. Once Tiangong is complete, China will be the only country to operate a space station of its own, adding to other accomplishments such as landing on Mars last year and on the far side of the Moon in 2019. Under President Xi Jinping, China has increased efforts to match the U.S. as the dominant power in space, teaming up with Russia on a proposed lunar research station and opposing the Washington-backed Artemis Accords, which are intended to help govern future space activity, such as mining on the Moon. Chinese state media has criticized the Accords as an effort to create a space-based version of NATO. So far, though, the U.S. is winning more countries over to its vision for space. Colombia became the 19th country to endorse its vision for space governance, signing the Accords on May 10th. While China has released images of the station in the past, the new one offers online viewers a better chance to hone in on specific parts. It provides a closer look at details such as the green stripes wrapping around several cylinders, the orange and black solar panels, and the Chinese flags on the exterior. The cabin will have capacity for 6 people who will be able to occupy more than 110 cubic meters of activity space, according to the official People's Daily. There will also be 2 exit hatches for astronauts and 1 for cargo. Zhurong, the rover that China landed on Mars last year, has temporarily gone into dormancy because of a dust storm, according to state media, citing the China National Space Administration, which predicted the rover would resume operations around December.
ARRL Field Day is Ham Radio's open house, and it will be here June 25th through the 26th. Every June, more than 40,000 hams throughout North America set up temporary transmitting stations in public places to demonstrate ham radio's science, skill, and service to our communities and our nation. It combines public service, emergency preparedness, community outreach, and technical skills, all in a single event. Field Day has been an annual event since 1933 and remains the most popular event in ham radio. Plan your participation now. Visit www.arrl.org/fieldday for rules and resources.
The results of 2 spring section manager elections were determined when the ballots were counted at ARRL headquarters on Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Because no nominations were received by the original nomination deadline of September 10th, 2021, it was necessary to resolicit nominations for the Delaware section manager position. Joseph Gribb, KI3B, a resident of Bear, Delaware, was appointed interim Delaware section manager in January 2022 until the election could be held. John Ferguson, K3PFW, a resident of Georgetown, received 162 votes, and Gribb received 96 votes. Ferguson will begin his 18-month term instead of a 2-year term as section manager on July 1st. In Indiana, Bob Burns, AK9R, received 625 votes, and incumbent section manager Jimmy Mary, KC9RPX, received 344 votes. Burns, a resident of Brownsville, will begin his 2-year term on July 1st. Mary, a resident of Ellettsville, has served as section manager for the past 4 years. Wisconsin will have a new section manager on July 1st. Jason Spetz, KC9FXE, a resident of Menominee, was the sole nominee. Spetz will take the reins of the section's field organization from Patrick Moretti, KA1RB. Moretti, a resident of Dousman, decided not to run for a new term of office after serving as section manager since 2016. Scott Roberts, KK4ECR, the only nominee for the Northern Florida section, will become section manager on July 1st. He has been serving as the assistant section manager and public information coordinator for the section. He'll succeed Kevin Bess, KK4BFN, who decided not to run for a new term. Bess, a resident of Edgewater, has been section manager since 2018. The following incumbent section managers who did not face opposition were declared re-elected and will begin new terms on July 1st. Thomas Beebe, W9RY in Illinois, Philip Dugan, N1EP in Maine, David Kidd, KA7OZO in Oregon, James Armstrong, NV6W in Santa Clara Valley, California, and Paul Gayette, AA1SU in Vermont. ARRL extends its thanks to all incumbent section managers for their past valued service, and congratulations to those who will take office beginning on July 1st.
The hobby of amateur radio, and portable operating in particular, is set to receive some high-profile coverage this coming Sunday, the 5th of June, on national television in the UK. The long-running BBC Countryfile programme airs at 6 p.m. on the main BBC One channel and will be coming from Flathome Island in the Bristol Channel. This location could claim to be the birthplace of radio, as it was the site of Marconi's first radio transmissions over sea. Presenters Ellie Harrison and Matt Baker will be with leading Summits on the Air operator Ben Lloyd, GW4 Bravo Mike Lima, as he sets up a portable station on the island in order to contact SOTA activators on hills and mountain summits around the UK. SOTA is a popular activity in the amateur radio world. Operators carry their portable equipment, including radios, antennas and batteries, to the top of a high point in the UK, and from there they try to contact as many stations as possible. For the most intrepid activators and collectors, a series of awards are achievable. If you can't watch the programme as it's broadcast, you can catch up with it later via BBC iPlayer.
The newest version of the Global Radio Guide is out. In this 18th edition, author Gail Van Horn discusses familiar players and familiar places as the radio industry responds to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. With more details on the latest edition of the Radio Guide, we go to Steve Richards, G4HPE, who files this report through the Southgate News Service.
In this 18th edition, author Gail Van Horn discusses familiar players and familiar places as the radio industry responds to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In the text, the author says that just as current world events have rekindled once buried feelings, it has also brought what many thought to be old technology back to the forefront. While internet access is one of the first targets of invading regimes intent on controlling the narrative, the vast reach of shortwave radio transcends borders and other forms of connectivity. It is déjà vu with a front row view. The guide includes articles about the international broadcasters on the front lines, as well as detailing information about the monitoring of utilities on the shortwave bands, including military communications. The 18th edition also includes its usual 24-hour station and frequency guide, with schedules for selected AM band, longwave and shortwave radio stations, plus listings of DX radio programs and internet website addresses for the many stations included. Whether you monitor shortwave radio broadcasts, medium wave, amateur radio operators, or aeronautical, maritime, government, or military communications in the HF radio spectrum, this book has the information you need to help you hear it all. The current edition of the Global Radio Guide is available on the Teak Publishing website at www.teakpublishing.com. Teak is Tango Echo Alpha Kilo, and it's also in Kindle form only via Amazon.
The current edition of the Global Radio Guide is available on the Teak Publishing website and via Kindle form only via Amazon.
The ARRL is seeking an administrative coordinator for the new ARRL Foundation Club Grant Program. This program seeks to fund transformative projects that enable growth for amateur radio operators, on-the-air projects, ham radio training and mentoring, and more. The program is funded by Amateur Radio Digital Communications, and it will award a total of $500,000 in club grants throughout 2022. The independent contractor will coordinate, administer, manage, and organize club grant applications at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut. To apply for this contract position, send a biography or profile to hr@arrl.org, or you can visit the ARRL website for a complete job description at www.arrl.org/careers.
Dr. Ed Snyder, W1YSM of Wallingford, Connecticut, who provided funding for an endowment to support the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative in 2017, has generously donated additional funding to expand the endowment to include ARRL-affiliated clubs. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with more.
The endowment, formerly known as the W1YSM Snyder Family Collegiate Amateur Radio Endowment Fund, has been renamed and will now be known as the W1YSM Snyder Family Collegiate and ARRL-affiliated Club Endowment Fund. Dr. Snyder credits ARRL's dedication to supporting amateur radio clubs across the nation with giving him a renewed passion for reinvigorating clubs. The additional contribution to the endowment allows ARRL to expand and continue club programs. Dr. Snyder, president of the Meridian Amateur Radio Association, views this program as essential to the legacy of amateur radio. ARRL Field Service Manager Mike Walters, W8ZY, stated that the W1YSM Snyder Family Collegiate and ARRL-affiliated Club Endowment Fund will benefit programs for large and small clubs across America. Amateur radio clubs are the backbone of local amateur activities, said Walters. Clubs mentor new amateur radio operators, serve their communities through emergency communications, and engage youth in STEM disciplines. ARRL has a network of almost 2,800 affiliated clubs in the U.S. If you'd like to locate a club, visit www.arrl.org, find a club, and please join us in celebrating this ARRL member-driven program's current and future success. To learn more about the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Program, visit www.arrl.org. We want you.
The Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative has led to the development of a national network of college amateur radio clubs under the aegis of ARRL and set up ways for these clubs to stay in contact and communicate on the air, in meetings, and through other activities. 5 years ago, ARRL began the Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative to support the grassroots fellowship between collegiate clubs, while highlighting their diverse technical and operating interests, said Andy Maluzzi, KK4LWR, who has co-advised the initiative with his brother Tony Maluzzi, KD8RTT. Together, they have organized collegiate meetups at hamfests, online groups via Discord and Facebook, and monthly Zoom forums. Collegiate amateur radio is an important pillar of both the hobby and STEM education, Maluzzi said. Thanks in part to the generous support from the W1YSM Snyder Family Collegiate and ARRL-affiliated club endowment, we are excited to announce that ARRL's collegiate support has graduated. The name change to ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Program reflects the ongoing support and growth of the thriving community of collegiate hams.
Produced by amateurs for amateurs and originating from Albany, New York, you're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
What are you doing on weekends at 9:30 in the morning local time? One ham would like you to do some very low-band operations by calling CQ as part of an experiment. Clark AA8SH is calling it his ground wave experiment, and he wants hams everywhere with 630-meter access to get on 474 kilohertz every Saturday and Sunday at 9:30 in the morning local time and try and make contacts. He'd like them to monitor other transmission and post signal reports in the forum section of QRZ.com. Clark, who's been testing 630-meter operation from his shack in West Virginia, say he's hoping this experiment can provide a sense of what kind of local range 630 meters has in each community. He hopes the results help to grow a greater interest in the 630-meter band. Clark said that based on International Telecommunications Union findings, a 630-meter signal at a certain strength can travel 150 miles, presenting communications options unavailable on the 160 and 175-meter bands, which have a shorter range at the same signal level. Power limits are set at 5 watts EIRP by the ITU and the FCC. Clark said the potential for the band remains untapped for amateur radio, but his own transmissions, conducted at a strength of 3 to 5 watts, are promising. They have been heard in Cincinnati, Ohio, about 100 miles away, and Marietta, Ohio, about 90 miles away. Clark went on to say in an email that he wants as many participants, both transmitting and receiving, as possible. The more the merrier. Morning operation is best, he said, because the band is quiet and free of static, so common in the evenings.
And now with the latest technology news and commentary from Petaluma, California. This Week in Amateur Radio is proud to present Leo Laporte.
Welcome. Good to see you. This is not a show for showing off our geek knowledge. Well, occasionally we'll get that. I can't help it. But really, it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be a show where we geeks get together to help you, adorable people, understand technology. I am bilingual. I speak both tongues, geek and normal, so I will be your guide to this weird and wacky world that's changing everything. I don't know if the world really realizes it, but this past week was kind of a watershed, an important transition, or the beginning of an important transition in technology. A transition that began in 2007 with the release of the iPhone. It's right about now, 13 years ago, the first iPhone came out. And I mean, we all know, I don't think I have to tell anybody what a difference the iPhone made in the world. You know, it was started with the iPhone, but then everybody copied it, and Android phones, which look very much like the iPhone, a slab of black glass, became very popular too. Let's not say Apple owns the market, by no means, but they started it. Then something else happened that it changed a lot of things. Suddenly you have a supercomputer in your pocket. You're always connected to the internet. That's really an interesting transition. You have applications you can run on these little pocket computers that can connect you to people. There would be no social media if it weren't for smartphones, right? I mean, we had them on the desktop. I'm not saying, you don't have desktop social media, desktop Twitter, desktop Facebook, but most of the usage now is mobile. Most computing is mobile. That's a big transition. Under the hood, though, there was a big transition, too, because unlike all the computing up to that point, and ever since the 70s, these new computers were not based on a chip design we call x86. Intel created it, but others made x86 chips, including AMD. Those chips really were dominant in desktop computing. Laptops and desktops had no place in mobile. And Intel tried. It wasn't that Intel didn't try, but their chips, for some reason, they couldn't figure out how to make them low power enough, cool enough to run in little tiny devices. So they just gave up. They literally gave up. And companies like Qualcomm and Samsung and others came along with their versions of these chips. Apple, of course, made their own chips, all based on not x86, but a different architecture called ARM. It's similar, it's different. A computer's a computer. From the point of view of those of us who use them, there isn't probably a whole lot of difference. But from the point of view of the designers, there is. ARM, which stands for Advanced RISC Machine. It's not RISK, it's RISC, Reduced Instruction Set Computer. Was much lower power, ran much cooler, did fewer things. That's the reduced instruction set. Didn't do as many things as the Big Brother x86 did, but it did it more efficiently. And it also began a transition that we call now the system on a chip. Because if you've got a small device, little pocket-sized computer, the last thing you want to do as a manufacturer is have 12 different chips on there. You want to make as few as possible. So they got more and more incorporated into the system on a chip. Memory, radios, interfaces to storage. Of course, the processor itself, a graphics processor later that would do all the graphics, the drawing on the screen. These systems on a chip became very, very powerful. And they were all based on this RISC architecture. Lower cost, lower power consumption, cooler running, not so hot. That's important too, right? In a little device like this, there's no fan in your phone. And this transition turned the world on its edge, on its ear, because no longer were the dominant form of computing done on laptops and desktops. It was in your pocket. Almost all the computing being done these days is done in your pocket. Now, of course, that internet connection in your pocket has to go to a more traditional big machine in a server somewhere. But even those started to feel the change. We're starting to see them move to ARM. And, of course, the big change happened this week when Apple said, you know what, we're not going to make any more computers based on the x86 architecture. Goodbye, Intel. Now, Apple doesn't own, the desktop marketplace. It's at best 10% of desktop and laptop computing. It doesn't, frankly, only owns about 20% of the phone space. In the U.S., it's more like 50%. But it's not even dominant in phones. But it is highly influential, just as the iPhone influenced every other smartphone after it, all running on chips that Apple had chosen. The iPhone's chips are Apple designed, but they're based on this ARM architecture. Just as everybody followed the leader there, in desktop computing, I think everybody might follow the leader there. And it might be bye-bye to the x86 architecture, which, let's face it, is pretty old. Came out in the 70s. It's almost 50 years old now. That's a pretty old system. For computing, 45 years is a lifetime. More than a lifetime. Several lifetimes. And we really have felt the pain of that. A lot of computing has been hobbled by this x86. We worked hard to make it, do a lot of stuff. But that chip in your desktop computer, the Intel i5 or i7 or maybe a Xeon, that thing uses more power than a light bulb. Several light bulbs. There's a lot of heat. That's why it's people with fast processors, sometimes you have water-cooled computers like a like a car on your desk. They generate a lot of heat. And what is heat? Well, heat is wasted electricity. That heat is not going towards computing or getting a job done. It's wasted electricity. So heat is not a good thing. It wears out chips and it shows that you're inefficient. Apple announced that they're going with what they call Apple Silicon starting this year, I think, and they said this transition will take 2 years. My suspicion is it'll be over by the end of 2021, by the end of next year. All Apple computers, all Macintosh computers will be running on these new Apple chips. And yeah, they're only 10% of the market, just like the iPhone's only 20% of the market. But watch, this is the beginning of the end, not just for Intel, but for this whole dated architecture. This is a change in the way we think of computing. This change has been going on in other ways too, because frankly, and Microsoft knows this. This week, Microsoft announced we're closing all the stores. We closed them for COVID. We're not going to reopen them. 86 stores worldwide. That's it. We're out of the store business. Now, why would Microsoft say we're getting out of the store business? Well, obviously, they weren't making money on their stores. But it also, I think, says something about the future of computing. Microsoft doesn't have a mobile phone platform. They kind of have mobile computers. They're like tablets. But that's still a laptop, let's face it. I think Microsoft's starting to say, hey, maybe the writing's on the wall. You know, it's actually started 5 years ago for Microsoft when Steve Ballmer, the CEO, left and a guy named Satya Nadella took over. Satya Nadella came from the cloud side of Microsoft. He ran Azure, their cloud services, and he has slowly been repositioning Microsoft away from computers, PCs, and more towards the cloud. That's where the future of Microsoft lies. It may be where the future of computing lies. We're in the middle of a big transition. It's going to be fun to watch. I'm actually thrilled because it's been getting boring's not the right word, but you probably have noticed that a computer you bought 5 years ago is not appreciably slower than the computer you'd buy today. The smartphones have kind of stagnated. They're getting bigger and, you know, weird things are happening. They're dropping headphone ports and stuff. But really, a slab of glass has looked pretty much the same over the last 5-6 years. We're in a plateau. That plateau is about to end, and things are about to get very interesting. And thank goodness for me, because that's what I do. So over the next year or so, as we talk about tech on the Tech Guy, I think we're going to see some interesting things happen. And that all you can all pin that on the events of Monday this week when Apple said, you know what, bye-bye Intel. I mean, Intel was a big name in personal computing for the last 40 years, wasn't it? I wonder what its future holds. Where will Apple Silicon be manufactured? We don't know a lot about Apple Silicon. In fact, I think that's a placeholder. I don't think that's the name. Right now, Apple in its iPhones uses the A series. It started with the A4. We're currently the highest level chip Apple makes today is the A12Z. I think it's Bionic. That's a terrible name, and I'm hoping Apple will not be continuing with this silly stuff. But at the same time, Threadripper, that's what AMD calls their chip. That's not a great name either. Threadripper, that's marketing. Just, a nice i7 isn't great either. i99U, that's not great either. So I'm sure Apple will come up with something. They won't manufacture them themselves. It's very unlikely. Most companies don't because it's expensive to build what we call a chip fab, short for fabrication facility. They used to be $1 billion to build a chip fab. I think it's more now. They're very expensive. So I think it's likely that Apple will contract this out. Right now, they get chips built. I think most of their chips are built by the Taiwan it's hard. It's a lot of letters. The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. That's why they call it TSMC. That's out of Taiwan. They may get chips. I don't believe they make any chips in China. They may get chips made. South Korea also has some very good chip manufacturing capabilities. And actually, Intel makes its chips all over the world, including in Oregon. So it's possible that Apple will be looking at getting a fab in the U.S. But my guess is they'll go to TSMC. That's where they get most of their stuff done these days, in Taiwan. So it's an interesting world we live in because the chips that are running in our computers are kind of made, they're designed by one company, incorporated by another, made by a third. So in the case of the iPhone, Apple designs the chips, as they have since the very beginning. But they're designing them based on an architecture, a chip design that they license from that ARM company I was talking about. That's why they're called the ARM chips. And then they manufacture them with another company, in most cases TSMC. So it's, and I don't think that's going to change, actually. I think what Apple's doing currently is probably what Apple will keep doing. So the answer is more of the same, really. Anyway, I'm glad you were here, and I'm here, and I'll be here next week, and I hope you'll come by and bring your friends, too, as we talk high tech. Leo Laporte, the Tech Guy.
Are you ready for another trip into amateur radio history? I'm Bill Continelli, W2XOY, and I'll be back in a moment with another edition of the Ancient Amateur Archives, here on This Week in Amateur Radio.
This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, with Amateur Radio History Headlines. 1894 through 1899. Marconi conducts his wireless experiments in Europe and sends a message across the English Channel. The first article on building a wireless set appears. 1901. Marconi sends a wireless signal across the Atlantic. 1900 through 1908. Thousands of Americans experiment with wireless. Few at this time are interested in it as a hobby only. 1904. J.A. Fleming develops the two-element diode vacuum tube. 1906. Lee DeForest develops the three-element triode vacuum tube. R.A. Fessenden uses the Alexanderson alternator to make the first voice and music transmissions. 1908. A possible beginning of amateur radio. Prior to this time, interest in wireless had primarily been either as an experimenter or as an entrepreneur. By 1908, definite hobby interest exists among users. 1909. The first radio clubs are formed. Spark and the long waves between 300 and 6,000 meters are king. This has been Amateur Radio History Headlines with Bill Continelli, W2XOY, for this week in Amateur Radio.
The Netherlands National Amateur Radio Society, Veron, reports on the amateur radio exams held on Saturday, May the 21st. The Netherlands has two types of amateur radio exam: CEPT Novice, which is equivalent to the UK Intermediate level, and Full, which is the CEPT Harmonised Amateur Radio Examination Certificate, or HAREC, which is a scheme where the amateur radio exams in many countries have a common standard. The Dutch novice exam comprises 40 questions each, with 3 answers to choose from, of which 29 must be answered correctly. The exam lasts for 75 minutes, and there's no need to do the novice exam before doing the full if you want to. The full exam comprises 50 questions, each with 4 answers to choose from, of which 35 must be correct. The exam lasts for 105 minutes. Henk, Papa Alpha Zero Hotel Papa Bravo, has now reported back on the 21st of May exams. For the novice exam, the pass rate was 84.8%, while for the full exam, 63.2% of the candidates passed. The total number of exam candidates was 52. Veron has congratulated the graduates and wishes the others every success in the resit. At the exams, an inspector was present as a representative of Agentschap Telecom, the Dutch regulator. For the full exam, 19 of the 20 invited candidates showed up and 12 of them passed. For the novice exam, 33 of the 39 invited candidates showed up and 28 of them passed. You can read more on the Veron website at tinyurl.com/IARU-Netherlands.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. When you finally get to the point of pushing the talk button on your microphone, after passing the test, receiving your license, getting your radio, building an antenna, digesting the manual, identifying a repeater, untangling its offset, programming those frequencies and keying up, you might be surprised to realize that you're lost for words, something which I've talked about before. Even if you do have something to say, finding a person to say it to will be the next big challenge. Truth be told, the more frequencies you have to choose from, the harder it seems to discover a fellow amateur, and with internet-connected repeater networks, your choice appears infinite. So how do you initiate communication on a repeater? Do you call CQ, ask for a signal check, or just kaplunk the repeater to prove that your signal is getting in? The very first thing to remember is that you have the exact same rights as every other amateur. No amateur is above any other, though hearing some conversations or responses might give you a different impression. Before you embark on a long speech, what you need to remember is that your ability to receive is not usually the same as your ability to transmit. If you're using a low-powered handheld radio that's tuned to a local repeater, you might be comparing your little stubby antenna inside your home held at an angle with that of a high-power repeater with a high-gain antenna bolted to a tower installed on the top of a hill. In other words, you can hear the repeater much better than it can hear you. You'll quickly observe that there are amateurs about who have their radio on all day long, and they'll often hear every single transmission that hits the local repeater, and even random frequencies. Sometimes this means that you'll have a great friend to talk to. Other times it means that you'll have a local troll who in their not-so-humble opinion determines what is permitted and what's not. So to get things rolling, you should follow the KISS principle, an aim championed by the lead engineer of the Lockheed Skunk Works in 1960, Kelly Johnson. Keep it simple, stupid. With keeping things simple, there's a fierce and ongoing debate around the use of the phonetic alphabet on a repeater. With the benefit of experience, having run a weekly radio net for over a decade, I'm going to be blunt. When you're identifying yourself to the rest of the community, always use phonetics. Only if you've been acknowledged and you're part of the conversation should you even consider dropping your phonetic call sign. The reason is that your first transmissions will be regularly interrupted by others, since they're having a conversation and you'll be butting in. Even if a net controller asks for check-ins, you should use phonetics, since you might not be the only one who keys up at the same time. If you and the controller have known each other for years and they recognize your voice, you could consider dropping the phonetics, but don't expect everyone to know who you are from a single letter getting through. Some people are better at this than others. Whatever you do, don't barge in with a whole story until you've been acknowledged and the microphone has been handed to you. After all, this is a public shared space. The next thing to consider is the audience you're talking to. If the repeater is just local, then the people within range are likely to expect your prefix and know who you are, so just your call might suffice. But if you connect to a network, that's not likely to be true. If you want to actually talk to anyone, you can call CQ, but if you just want to let people know you're there, you can say your call sign followed by the word listening. If you want to speak with a specific individual, on the other hand, you can call them using their phonetic call sign, either with or without the CQ. Also consider they might be on the other side of their shack working hard at attempts to avoid sniffing solder fumes and take a moment to get to the microphone. In other words, what you say on your repeater depends on what result you want and who else is there. Sometimes there will be a mismatch between the two. Just saying your call sign might initiate an hour-long conversation, and calling CQ might give you the local troll telling you to go away. Don't let that dissuade you. Even with years of practice, sometimes the results are unexpected. Talking on a repeater is like being invited to a party. There are going to be people you know, people you want to know, and people you never want to meet again. So be considerate, listen more than you talk, and be deliberate in your intentions, and you'll be fine. Thanks to Sandip, Echo India 7, India Juliet Bravo for the question, what are the rules for calling CQ on a repeater? If you have other burning questions, get in touch and ask. I'll try to give you a coherent answer. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
Amsat DL in Germany has reported that it has successfully received transmissions from Tiangong-1, the Chinese Mars mission. According to a recently published report, this took place at Bochum Observatory in Germany using a 20-meter antenna and a GNU or GNU radio. GNU radio is free open-source software used to create software-defined radios. The report, written by Daniel Estevez, EA4, GPZ, Mario Lorenz, DL5 MLO, and Peter Gutzlow, DB2 OS, said that the Chinese spacecraft has been successfully tracked using a real-time GNU radio decoder and has stored 10 months' worth of transmitted telemetry information. By interpreting the telemetry variables, the GNU radio was able to track the mission, which began with its launch on July 23rd of last year. The paper was first published for GNU Radio Conference 2021, held last September in North Carolina. The radio conference for 2022 is scheduled for September in Washington, D.C.
Here is this week's AMSAT report from Bruce Page, KK5D0. On May 25th, the second Arius interoperable radio system was installed on board the International Space Station. It is a Kenwood TM D71GA transceiver. The radio will be tested prior to being fully commissioned. InspireSat, which has been coordinated by the ARU, is transmit and receive capability on both 2-meter and 70-centimeter bands. It will operate similar to the UVSQ-SAT. The downlink will be on 435-200 megahertz, and the uplink will be on 145-830 megahertz, both FM. The planned launch is in December of this year. Nominations for AMSAT Board of Directors is open until June 15th. There are 3 positions on the board and 2 alternate positions that will be voted upon by the membership. You can visit amsat.org for more details.
It's time for the weekly propagation forecast report, brought to us each week by Tad Cook, K7RA, in Seattle, Washington, who reports this week all measures of solar activity declined in a big way from the last reporting week to the current period, May 26th through June 1st. The average daily sunspot number plummeted from 124.7 to 52.9, and the average daily 10.7 centimeter solar flux receded from 158.8 to 104.3. These are dramatic shifts, although well within expected variations at this point in solar cycle 25. So looking ahead, the predicted solar flux for the next week or so is 100 on June 5th through the 6th, 95 on June 7th through the 8th, 110, 130, 135, and 140 on June 9th through the 12th, 145, 150, and 145 on June 13th through the 15th. The predicted planetary A indice is a quiet and stable 5 on June 2nd through the 9th, 8 and 12 on June 10th and 11th, 14 on June 12th and 13th, and 8 and 12 on June 14th and 15th.
The official attendance at the 2022 Dayton Hamvention was 31,367 visitors. General Chairman Rick Allnut, WS8G, said although that was about 1,000 less than in 2019, he considered it a not bad for a pandemic recovery year. Hamvention was canceled in 2020 and 2021 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Had some radio sport contesting this weekend of note. On June 4th, the 1010 International Open Season PSK contest, that is, of course, digital. Also on June 4th, Wake Up QRP Sprint, that is CW. Then on June 4th and June 5th, Can-Ham contest, CW Phone. The TISA Cup CW contest, that's CW. Kentucky QSO Party, CW Phone and Digital. The UKSMG Summer Contest, CW Phone and RIDI. And then the IARU Region 1 Field Day, the RSGB National Field Day, and the ARRL International Digital Contest. No RIDI will be available there. And for this upcoming weekend in the State Section and Division Convention list, June 3rd through the 5th, the CPAC now hosting the ARRL Northwestern Division Convention on Seaside, Oregon. And on June 4th, the Atlanta Hamfest hosting the ARRL Georgia State Convention in Marietta, Georgia. Then on June 18th, the Knoxville Hamfest and Electronics Convention hosting the ARRL Tennessee State Convention. That's in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Top band is the name used by many radio amateurs to denote the 160-metre amateur band. It used to be the longest wavelength available to radio amateurs, although now longer wavelength bands exist. And a top band certificate is being sponsored by the South African Radio League. Its aim is to encourage more 160-metre contacts with Southern African countries. All contacts after the 1st of January 1960 are valid for this award. Contacts must be established in the range 1800 to 2000 kHz. Currently, South African amateurs can transmit between 1810 and 2000 kHz. South African stations must submit confirmation of having contacted at least 6 different Southern African call areas, of which at least 5 must be in the Republic of South Africa. The 6th contact may be from the remaining South African call areas, which are callsign prefix Zulu Sierra, or from any of the bordering countries, Botswana, Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, Eswatini, or Zimbabwe. DX stations, that's amateurs a long way away from South Africa who are within 1,000 kilometres of the borders of South Africa, need to confirm a contact with 3 call areas in the Republic. Valid confirmations are paper QSL cards, electronic QSLs, or those recorded in Logbook of the World. Visit www.sarl.org.za/public/awards for all the information. The South African Radio League reckons this challenge is easier than their popular Worked All South Africa award.
The 2022 Youth on the Air Camp will be on the air and streaming online. The campers will be operating special event station W8Y from the National Voice of America Museum of Broadcasting in Westchester Township, Ohio, as well as from their hotel. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more in this report from League headquarters.
Activation of W8Y will begin on the evening of Sunday, June 12th and conclude at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Friday, June 17th. Campers will operate the station as they finish projects between camp sessions and during their free time. In addition, dedicated high-frequency stations will be operating on Monday, June 13th from 2 to 11 p.m., Dedicated satellite operating station times will be on Thursday, June 16th and Friday, June 17th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And Earth, Moon, Earth, EME will be in operation on Tuesday, June 14th and Monday, June 13th from 9 to 11 p.m. The opening and closing ceremonies will be streamed live on the Youth on the Air YouTube channel. The operating ceremony will take place on Sunday, June 12th from 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and will feature keynote speaker Dr. Daniel Frizzell, W2NAF, the founder of the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation. The closing ceremony is on Friday, June 17th from 1 p.m. until 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
The Youth on the Air YouTube channel will also feature a daily video that will spotlight the activities of the previous day. For details about the 2022 Yoda Summer Camp, download the brochure from the Yoda webpage at www.youthontheair.org. For additional information, contact Camp Director Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, at director@youthontheair.org.
Low CQ, POTA, CQ Parks on the Air.
This is November 3, Victor Echo Mike from Parks on the Air with your month ending April 2022 Parks on the Air update. Be sure to visit parksontheair.com for information about the program and POTA.app for spotting, park information, leaderboards, and more. In Parks on the Air news, due to popular demand and a willing supply of sponsors, we have added 3 new DX Hunter categories to this summer's plaque event to complement the new DX Activator plaques. This brings the total number of plaques available to win up to 17. To have a shot at winning these plaques, join the fun on July 16th and 17th. More details are available from the plaque event menu item at POTA.app. If you're a ham that happens to be into free and open source social media platforms as an alternative to the offerings of the large corporate interests, we're pleased to share that Parks on the Air and several of its volunteers now have a presence on the Fediverse. Look for us using the handle at parksontheair at mastodon.radio. And now for everybody's favorite segment, the monthly stats update. April's activity weekend gave us a nice mid-month boost, which helped drive the monthly totals. We had over 2,000 operators out who did 11,281 activations from 4,333 parks in 34 different DX entities. The top activators for the month were the same 2 individuals as last month, N2 NWK, who this month did 278 activations, and W6ZD, who activated a mind-blowing 198 different parks. The top hunters for the month were K9 ICP, who hunted 966 parks, and AD2CD, who made 1,598 QSOs, just edging out N3 XLS. In POTA DX, we had a changing of the guard in Region 1. The activators in Spain came out in full force and edged out England based on the number of activations. Canada and Japan continued to hold their top spots in Regions 2 and 3 respectively. Our top DX activators this month were HI8DL from the Dominican Republic, who did 76 activations, and VA7DBJ from Canada, who activated 62 parks. Last but not least, let's check in on the progress of the Bailey Sprott Challenge. In 2021, N5HA and W9AV each managed to hunt a park every day. In 2022, we're following along to see if anyone else can match their feat. At 120 days into the year, we have 3 activators who have activated every day of the year, along with 3 others who may still be in the running pending log uploads. N2 NWK, KE8 PZN, KD4 MZM, K4 NYM, KB3 WAV, and WC1N. The pool of hunters is now down to 36. To all of the Bailey Sprott participants, congrats on your success so far, and we look forward to seeing how you do now that we have passed the 100-day mark. This concludes our April 2022 Parks on the Air update. As always, the team at Parks on the Air wishes you safe activations and happy hunting. 73.
On Saturday, May 28th, as Hurricane Agatha, the first hurricane of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season, was ready to make landfall in Mexico, operators at WX4NHC at the National Hurricane Center were conducting the annual readiness check of the station for 2022. With more details, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this report.
This marks the 42nd year of volunteer communication services for the NHC. After 2 years of volunteer ham radio operators working remotely from their home stations due to COVID-19 safety restrictions, hams were able to operate inside the NHC for this year's annual test event. The event was reported as successful, with all of the station's radios and antennas having performed well, and within 8 hours, 289 contacts were made nationwide and internationally. Operators used high-frequency VHF and UHF radios, as well as digital modes. Then on Monday, May 30th, Hurricane Agatha hit Mexico as a Category 2 storm with maximum sustained winds of 106 miles an hour. It was recorded as the strongest hurricane to come ashore in May during the Eastern Pacific hurricane season, making landfall on a sparsely populated stretch of small beach towns and fishing villages in southern Mexico. The next morning, Agatha was downgraded to a tropical depression with winds of 35 miles an hour.
The NHC Hurricane Net, staffed with volunteer amateur radio operators, was on standby in case the storm's path changed and grew more intense. Oaxaca's Emergency Service Office said there were no reports of any deaths, but the storm's torrential rains and winds drove tourists and residents into shelters.
For those looking to get their entry-level U.S. amateur radio technician license, the exam questions are updating starting on July 1st, 2022. The new questions will be valid through 2026. Ham Radio Prep, the nation's fastest online growing amateur radio education program, has launched a completely revamped multimedia course covering all of the questions in the updated exam, making it possible for aspiring amateur radio operators to study the new questions without missing a beat. The new course includes not only text study guides, but completely revamped video learning, games, quizzes, and real-life practice tests, much like one experiences when taking the official FCC Amateur Radio License exam. Ham Radio Prep has made a massive investment in the future of ham radio with its new Technician License course, and will only improve upon the popular study program already used by more than 60,000 successful students. The course is the first and only complete video course that covers the new question pool that goes into effect on July 1st. Our new course was a collaboration with hams with decades of experience, James Cribbs, founder and CEO of Ham Radio Prep, said. In retooling the course, we focused on effectiveness while teaching the concepts, remaining short and to the point to ensure high completion rates. Since its start, Ham Radio Prep has upgraded its technician license course 3 times to meet the demands of its tens of thousands of students studying in the online platform. The new course is based on the new FCC question pool that is in effect from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2026. The Technician Class License is the entry-level permit issued to persons who want to get on the air as radio amateur operators. Hams with the Technician License can help provide emergency communications in their community, experiment on the air, and talk with other operators both in their general region as well as around the world, depending on radio frequencies used and atmospheric conditions. Question pools for amateur radio licenses are rewritten every 4 years by the National Conference of Volunteer Examiner Coordinators, a non-profit organization that ensures the integrity of the licensing process for ham radio in the United States. New questions reflect changes in technology, rule changes, and more. Ham Radio Prep submitted 25 questions to the NCVEC for use in the new question pool, and a number of those submitted are reflected in the new questions and answers. Ham Radio Prep drew upon the expertise of our own staff, as well as many of our students, to draw together questions we felt were important to be included on this new round of technician class exams. Chuck Geisey, general manager of Ham Radio Prep, said, "Our students often have comments about the questions they encounter on their exams, and we used that input to bring their experience to the NCVEC Question Pool Committee." Questions submitted by the Ham Radio Prep to the National Conference of Volunteer Examiner Coordinators included correct answers and distractors on a variety of subjects ranging from amateur radio operations, technology, emissions, FCC rules and regulations, frequency use, and more. There are more than 775,000 licensed amateur radio operators in the United States and its territories. Ham Radio Prep offers courses designed to teach people online the information they need to take the 3 classes of exams that grant them FCC licenses for amateur radio. Courses also teach students how to be legal and safe on the airwaves in accordance with FCC rules and regulations. Ham Radio Prep was established in 2017 to assist people interested in obtaining an FCC-issued amateur radio license by offering courses for the technician, general, and amateur extra class licenses. For more information about Ham Radio Prep, go to hamradioprep.com.
The Irish Radio Transmitter Society was founded in 1932, and this year they celebrate their 90th birthday. To mark the occasion, the Society has secured the special call sign Echo India 90 India Romeo Tango Sierra. Since its initial use, the call sign has attracted multiple pile-ups on all bands and modes it's been used on. This call is available to activate for any ERA IRTS licensed member that's interested in activating it. The special call can be activated on all bands and modes, and the duration of any activity is entirely up to the operator. It can be for an hour or even a whole day. All logs must be submitted electronically in ADIF format. To make sure that the call sign is not used on the same bands or modes at the same time, its use is being coordinated by Declan, Echo India 9, Foxtrot Victor Bravo. A special WhatsApp group is in use to help with the coordination. If any fully licensed ERA IRTS member would like to activate the EI90 IRTS call sign, you're please asked to get in touch with Declan, Echo India 9, Foxtrot Victor Bravo, by email. A special QSL card will be made available once printed. Direct QSLs can be sent to Dave, Echo India 6 Alpha Lima. For more information, including QSL details, please see qrz.com.
And New England announces Straight Key Night in June. If you're in New Zealand, set aside the second Sunday in June and be in the shack between 8 and 9 p.m. local time. Winter Straight Key Night will be going strong, at least as strong as the 100-watt limit. And amateurs will be paying tribute to sending code the old-fashioned way. Listen for radio operators calling CQ, SKN, or just SKN. The exchange will be RST, location, name, key, transmitter, and power. Straight Key Night is being held with the support of the New Zealand Morse Code Telegraph Key Directory. Remember, it's a casual event, and there won't be any certificates awarded. There will be a lot of QSOs, however, and a whole lot of nostalgia.
And now, with his segment on tower climbing and antenna safety, here is Arizona's own Greg Stoddard, KF9MP.
Here's a subject most hams have had to deal with, on towers, on the roof, or on the ground: waterproofing coax connections. Let's look at the 4 most popular products I know of. The most commonly used product I know of is called Coax Seal. This stuff is sold on small rolls, about a ½ inch wide and 60 inches long. It is easy to apply to clean and dry surfaces. At the size sold, one roll does not cover much except maybe 1 or 2 small connectors. My experience with Coax Seal is it stands up to the elements well over a period of years and is somewhat reusable for the first months in the environment. On a commercial tower, the white strips of paper fly away nicely in a gentle breeze. Being sold on a roll, it is easy to secure several to a climbing belt like rolls of electrical tape. In a tool bag, it tends to get squished into shapes that make it hard to use. Another method of protecting connections is with liquid electrical tape. This stuff is commonly sold in small, 4-ounce cans at the hardware store. These small cans are similar to those used for PVC cement and include a brush. This substance is similar to a solvent-dissolved polymer, perhaps even rubber. Since it is kept in a liquid state with solvents, which evaporate when it applied or when the can is left open, you probably don't want to smoke while the can is open. After application with this product, the protective layer tends to be much thinner than with the wrap-type sealer. This does make an excellent underlayer when using a wrap-on sealer. For ground-level connections where repeated layers can be added, this stuff is both easy to use and a good value. Liquid electrical tape probably cannot be applied over Coax Seal, but it can be applied onto less than perfect surfaces. But again, clean and dry is best. According to the label, multiple layers can be added if you allow the stuff to set for about 5 minutes. Since it is sold in the can, it rides along in the tool bag but is easily dropped. Although I've only seen this one used a couple of times, some people still use electrical tape to seal coax connections. I do not recommend using electrical tape unless it is used as a cover over one of the wraps or brush-on sealers. Problem with electrical tape is it ages poorly when exposed to sunlight, moisture, heat, and more. It tends to start to unwrap over time, crack, or get brittle. When you've installed as many antennas as I have, you've probably read some mention of how thickly you can cover a connection before you mess up that antenna's ability to shed rainwater. So the bottom line on electrical tape is I will not recommend using it as a primary protective layer. The fourth method I know of is similar to Coax Seal on rolls. Some commercial climbers use insulation wrap for automotive air conditioner systems. There are lots of brands available, so you'll have to go to several auto parts stores to hunt for the really good stuff. This wrap is much wider and thicker than Coax Seal and comes on a roll just like Coax Seal. This is made to be wrapped on metal tubes coming in and out of automotive air conditioner compressors to reduce dripping of water, improve efficiency, and protect from the elements. And since it is made to stand up to the elements and is also cost effective, the only startup cost for you is doing the research and finding a brand and a supplier. There are lots of different kinds, so look for the one most like Coax Seal and test it on your own before using it on someone else's antenna. Oh yeah, there is one more, similar to Coax Seal. It is sold in a toothpaste type tube. I've never used any, so I can't comment on how it holds up to Mother Nature or how it is to use. Remember, tower work at any height can easily become deadly. Clear, sober minds must be in charge. Money spent on books, videos, and climbing gear is well worth the investment. This is Greg Stoddard, KF9MP, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
The amateur radio on the International Space Station, that's ARISS organization, recently received scheduled confirmation for a 31st of May radio contact between astronauts aboard the International Space Station and students at the Old St. Mary's School located in Chicago, Illinois. ARISS conducts 60 to 80 of these special amateur radio contacts each year between students around the globe and crew members with ham radio licenses aboard the International Space Station. Old St. Mary's School has about 500 students in preschool through to 8th grade and is located next to a museum campus, which includes a planetarium, a natural history museum and an aquarium. Old St. Mary's School began a partnership in 2018 with the Museum of Science and Industry, MSI, in Chicago. For the last 4 years, the museum's Science Leadership School Partners program has provided support to improve the school's science program by developing partnerships and communication with families and stakeholders and promoting whole school projects, including this space station contact. In preparation for the hookup, students learned about a wide range of science, technology, engineering and maths-related topics that address space habitation, our solar system, orbital motions, low-gravity conditions and radio wave properties, including digital communications. Students participated in various hands-on activities that applied an understanding of the so-called STEM subjects to various types of model building, as well as attending field trips to their nearest Challenger Learning Centre. The space station contact was a multi-point telebridge contact via amateur radio, allowing students to ask questions of astronaut Bob Hines, amateur radio callsign Kilo India 5, Romeo Quebec Tango. Local COVID-19 protocols were adhered to as applicable for each ARISS contact. The downlink frequency for this contact was 145.800 MHz and could be heard by listeners that are within the International Space Station footprint that also encompasses the telebridge station. What was really interesting about this particular event was that the ARISS amateur radio telebridge ground station was in Artselaar, Belgium. So any stations in the European footprint were able to listen to the downlink from the ISS on 145.800 MHz, and the contact was conducted in English. The amateur radio volunteer team at the ground station used the callsign Oscar November 4 India Sierra Sierra to establish and maintain the space station connection. The school even made a live stream available so that the public could watch the event as it happened. Students lined up 12 questions for the astronaut, and for example they asked, how did it feel when you're blasting off during the first moments in space? What is the most satisfying or amazing thing you've ever seen in space? And is it lonely being away in space from your family for so long? How do you handle your emotions?
The arrival of June has brought an extra element of distinction for amateur radio operators in the United Kingdom who are looking to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee on the air. Hams who have applied for a notice of variation from Ofcom will be inserting a Q into their call signs throughout the month to mark the occasion. Those who have not applied for the notice of variation can still add /70 to the end of their call signs as an alternative. Be listening on the bands for that extra touch for the Royal Celebration. The opportunity has been made available to hams at Foundation, Intermediate, and full license levels. The addition of Q to call signs had also been authorized for the Queen's earlier jubilees in 2012 and 2020.
The Xenia Daily Gazette, a newspaper and website in the state of Ohio, USA, reports that amateur radio has no boundaries, as there are operators all over the world, and there are few age parameters either. Just ask 10-year-old Riley Lorang. The newspaper said that the 10-year-old from San Jose, California, obtained his first license, Kilo November 6 Juliet Whiskey Whiskey, at the age of 8, and his general class license last summer when he was 9. He actually started getting into radio as a first grader, but had to let it go until the last couple of years. When asked what got him interested in amateur radio, Riley said that he always wanted to play with the buttons on his father's radios. He attended last weekend's Ham Vention in Ohio, and this was his first visit to the event. The paper goes on to highlight 3 siblings from the Wagner family, Bernadette, Benedict, and Agnes, and they are a little more experienced in Ham Vention as they attended for the first time in 2019 before COVID shut things down for a couple of years. Benedict, 13, has been licensed for 4 years. Bernadette, 15, and Agnes, 12, have had their licenses for 3 years. Benedict has call sign Alpha Delta 8 Foxtrot Quebec, and he said that he went to amateur radio club meetings with his dad and thought it was fun. His favourite part of amateur radio is participating in contests, where he and others in his club try to contact as many people as possible in the allowed time period. Agnes, Alpha Delta 8 India Romeo, took the lead from her brother and some friends who were already ham operators. She commented that she thinks it's cool to talk to her friends using amateur radio, and in particular she liked to play with the digital modes. You can read the full story with some great photographs at www.xeniagazette.com. Don't forget to spell Xenia with an X for X-ray.
Many of the news and information items heard on this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, the Southgate Amateur News Service, Steve Richards, G4 Hotel Papa Echo, and the Southgate Vibes News Service, Amsat, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the FCC, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia, and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the Tech Guy, Leo Laporte, the International Telecommunications Union, and various news sources on the Internet.
Electron Binders Amateur Radio Club in Tulsa, Oklahoma, airs This Week in Amateur Radio, every week on club-owned KOKTLP 90.9.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2